Parasites. Malaria. The term malaria comes from the Italian words for bad air. Mal or mala equals bad, area equals air. As I said at the beginning of the last chapter, until the 19th century, when scientists realized germs, whether bacteria, viruses, or otherwise, caused people to get sick, many people, including scientists, believed that illnesses came from bad air, which was called miasma, from the Greek word for pollute. Given how many diseases are transmitted through the air, this theory was understandable if mostly wrong. Although it was realized that germs, some of which traveled through the air, were actually to blame for everything from cholera to consumption, as TB was called in the 19th century. Malaria had already become the name of a particular and all too common illness. Malaria exists in close to 100 countries today, though this is changing as we'll see, and not for the better, and threatens almost half the world's population every year. In 2013, there were close to 200 million cases of malaria, and more than 500,000 people died from the disease. But 100 years ago, even 15 years ago, malaria was more prevalent and more deadly. The number of kids who die from malaria in Africa has dropped by more than half since 2000. That's a big deal because nearly all malaria deaths occur in Africa, and most of those who die are children under 5. But we still have a lot of work to do until all children are safe from deadly mosquitoes. In 2013, a child died of malaria every minute. There are 5 different parasites that cause malaria in humans, all of which spread to people through the bites of infected mosquitoes. The types of mosquitoes that carry malaria generally bite at night and breed in standing water, sometimes in places as shallow as a footprint. Mosquitoes love stagnant water. It's where adult mosquitoes lay their eggs to hatch more baby mosquitoes that can infect even more people. That's why ongoing efforts to refresh or get rid of standing bodies of water, whether outdoor watering holes for animals or indoor vases for flowers, are so important. When there are more mosquitoes after the rainy season in the tropics, for example, malaria risk and infections go up. As the Earth's average temperature grows warmer and warmer, as is currently happening, malaria-carrying mosquitoes can survive, breed, and infect more people in more places. This is particularly concerning for places that have never had to deal with mosquitoes because they're less likely to be prepared, and for places like the US that eliminated malaria decades ago. In the 1940s, the US made eliminating malaria a priority. The large-scale national effort centered on the 13 southern states where it still lurked, including Arkansas, where I was born. Through extensive use of insecticides on and around homes, as well as through draining swamps, by 1951, the U.S. declared victory over malaria. But as the Earth warms, higher temperatures could make it easier for malaria mosquitoes to reinvade the U.S. Thankfully, as discussed in viruses and vaccines, we have a strong public health system. So while we hope malaria doesn't come back, we're better prepared in case it does. Other countries aren't as well protected, which is why the number of countries with malaria could sadly soar far past 100 if we don't keep fighting malaria and do something to stop global warming, talked about in the next chapter. Malaria's first symptoms can often be mistaken for the flu or a cold: fever, headache, chills, and vomiting. Symptoms can worsen in people of all ages, but young children are particularly vulnerable, in part because they lack the immunity or protection adults have often developed to malaria by repeatedly surviving infections. But mild malaria symptoms aren't something to celebrate. They often cause people to miss work or kids to miss school. As is discussed in $1.25 a day, malaria is expensive for families and countries. The progress the world has made against malaria is the result of a combination of efforts over time, including getting people the medicines they need to cure it and getting people the bed nets and other tools they need to prevent it. An insecticide called DDT played a major role in the U.S. campaign against malaria in the 20th century. That strategy certainly worked in eliminating malaria from the U.S., but it also hurt bald eagles, discussed in Too Close to Gone. So while other insecticides are used to guard against malaria, the world doesn't use DDT anymore. Additionally, recent research has found a probable link between long-term DDT exposure and certain cancers. Still, some people think we should use DDT given how powerful it is against mosquito-borne diseases. As on all debates, this is one where you'll have to weigh different evidence, even as it's evolving, and make up your own mind. Today, the main tools used to fight malaria are insecticide-treated bed nets, just like the one in the picture at the start of this chapter. They're exactly what their name implies, nets with insecticide in them that mosquitoes can't get through. The nets block the mosquitoes, the insecticide kills them. When the nets are used appropriately, people sleep under them at night. Nearly half of the people in Africa who live in places with malaria either have a net to cover themselves and their children while sleeping or can afford one. It's particularly important kids sleep under nets because of how vulnerable they are to malaria. Medicines also exist that people can take to help prevent malaria. While somewhat similar to vaccines, they're not the same and they're generally expensive to make and not very easy to use, which is why we still need a malaria vaccine. While there's never been a vaccine against a parasite like malaria, scientists and researchers are working hard on developing one. Because there's no vaccine and millions of people aren't yet sleeping under nets, early diagnosis and treatment are important in controlling malaria. This is so people can recover more quickly. That seems obvious, and it is. But it's also vital to treat people quickly so they're less likely to pass on the malaria parasite via a mosquito to someone else. We think of mosquitoes infecting people, and they do, but mosquitoes are first infected with malaria by biting someone who has the disease. It's a very nasty cycle that can be broken only through appropriate treatment, including drugs called artemisinins and prevention. There's also growing concern about malaria becoming resistant to artemisinins, an area being closely watched by health officials. To learn about malaria, including its economic impact as discussed in $1.25 a day, Malaria No More is a terrific resource, which you can find at malarianomore.org. Pennsylvania native Catherine first learned about malaria in 2006 after she and her mom Linda watched the PBS documentary Malaria: Fever Wars. They decided to help as many people as they possibly could get bed nets to protect themselves and their kids from malaria. They thought everyone should know that at that time, malaria was killing a child in Africa every 30 seconds, statistics that could change, and have, with something as simple as a bed net. Catherine and Linda started by working with their church and local community to raise awareness about malaria and to encourage people to think about giving nets as Christmas gifts. That first year, Catherine and her mom raised more than $10,000, including from the sale of more than 600 gift certificates that they had hand decorated and which showed up in stockings and under Christmas trees. The gift certificates were for purchasing bed nets in honor of the recipient, who then knew that a life had been protected, even saved from malaria. That was only the beginning of their work to raise awareness and to raise funds. By 2011, when Catherine was 10, she and her mom had spoken at the White House, the annual conference of the United Methodist Church and the United Nations. They'd been in the Philadelphia Inquirer and the New York Times. Linda had traveled to Uganda to participate in a bed net distribution program. As of 2015, they've raised more than $300,000, enough for tens of thousands of bed nets, working with nothing but nets. When Catherine started, she was just 5 years old. You're never too young to make a difference. For ideas on how to raise awareness about malaria and raise funds to get people the bed nets they need for malaria prevention, and also to learn more about Catherine and Linda's work, please visit nothingbutnets.net. Malaria shouldn't stop you from going anywhere in the world. If you're traveling to an area where malaria is common, talk to your doctor about which medicines you and your family should take, which bug spray to use, and what else you should do. What you'll likely hear is how important it is that you sleep under an insecticide-treated bed net. Like with TB, I've traveled to lots of places with malaria, followed my doctor's advice, and have never gotten sick, knock on wood. Malaria is not the only mosquito-borne illness that's becoming more common in places as the earth warms. Dengue fever is another. While it's not a parasite, it's actually a virus, so it's an interloper in this chapter. Like malaria, dengue is passed from people to mosquitoes and back to people. It's rarely fatal, but it's increasingly common, particularly in Latin America and the US, which is why it's included here. Over the past few years, it's infected hundreds of millions of people every year. People who get dengue suffer from high fevers, pains, headaches, rashes, and bleeding from the nose and gums. It's the bleeding that gives the more severe form of dengue hemorrhagic fever. Its name, hemorrhagic, means bleeding a lot. The word hema means blood in Greek, and reg means a breaking. Dengue is one of the rare diseases in which younger children generally don't get as sick as older kids and adults. Preventing dengue largely looks like preventing malaria, using bug spray and insecticide-treated bed nets, and removing stagnant water mosquitoes love. Treatment for dengue is similar to treatment for the flu or a cold. Lots of fluids and rest. Thankfully, most people who get dengue don't suffer the hemorrhagic kind, and most recover. We've made a lot of progress around bed nets, but we're still far from 100% coverage. Preventing malaria and dengue are two very good reasons we should keep working on the goal of getting every family that needs one an insecticide-treated bed net.